Welcome back to The Weekend, everyone. Opening statements are scheduled to take place on Monday in Donald Trump's 2016 election interference trial, now that a full jury has been seated. The 12-person jury, it consists of 7 men and 5 women with 6 alternates. And the process came with a lot of drama. One juror asked to be taken off the case after her personal information was made public. Just yesterday, 2 potential jurors broke down crying during the selection process, while 3 others said they were too anxious to serve. Joining us now is New York Times investigative reporter Suzanne Craig, who's been in the courtroom, and also MSNBC legal analyst and former prosecutor Charles Coleman.
What are you guys doing here? You guys should be home taking a nap. This should be like the one day you do not have to be on the beat. So thank you for being here.
They've been on TV all week.
They've been on TV nonstop. They've been on TV.
Leisurely for me. I have to be down there at 6 a.m. just to queue to get in.
Late for you.
We can't resist the weekend.
Here's my question, which is we all watched this minute to minute. We know details about jurors who ultimately were never seated. If you were not watching all week, what changed this week? What was the big story out of the courtroom?
I really do think it was, I think the emotion, but it was just the difficulty of getting a jury together. You know, we started on Monday, and by, I think, Tuesday, we had 7 seated. And then Wednesday morning, we came in, and 2 overnight changed their mind. And one of the reasons was a woman who had agreed to do it. Her family guessed based on all the information that was out there, even though it wasn't her name, they guessed it was her. They, you know, it was like a nurse at this hospital who looks like this. Didn't take much to figure it out for people who knew. So that happened. And then there were other jurors who were concerned that the stress was going to be too much. And I want to just talk a little bit about how a juror even got into the box. The judge at the outset, and this doesn't normally happen during jury selection, but he said to all the jurors when they came in, if you have a reason you don't want to serve, if you feel very strongly about the former president and you just want out of here, you can leave. If you have a family obligation, whatever it is, you don't even need to explain it. So the people left had already made a decision that they wanted to go forward. And then as the week built, the stress really happened. And part of it came when after the jurors have to answer a questionnaire, and they go through 42 questions. It's a lot of questions. And then after that, the government and the defense each get to question the jurors. And some of the questions, particularly from the defense, from Donald Trump's lawyers, were quite pointed. And on Friday morning, one woman started to cry, and she just said, this is just more stressful than I thought. And she was in tears. It's very emotional. She had a private conversation with the judge, and she was excused. But then Friday, it was around 1:32, we didn't break for lunch, and we got a jury with the alternates. And just as that happened, it felt like it happened the minute we got the jury seated. News broke in the overflow room where all the reporters were that somebody had set themselves on fire outside the courthouse. And just a chill went through the place. And that was just, that was such a shock. And I can't imagine the jurors who are seated haven't heard about it. And I have to wonder now, coming into Monday morning, we have opening arguments. Jurors are going to be in the box if we're going to have somebody else say, I can't do this. So that's like the tension and the emotion was just high all week. When I reflect on it, that's what I think about.
You know, Alicia, for me, to pick up exactly where Sue left off, it is the difference between theory and practice. You're talking about, in theory, which we've been discussing for the past year plus, what it would be like to have the former president of the United States of America on trial. And now we're here. And you're understanding some of the very practical difficulties that are associated with that, not only from the judge keeping order in the courtroom to Donald Trump literally having the stamina to stay awake during the very emotionally taxing task of a full trial day to, of course, as Sue was talking about, picking a jury. So we're no longer discussing things in theory or in sort of the ideological space. This is real. This is happening. This is not a game. And I think the reality of that emotionally is very, very heavy. And one thing I've been saying all week, it's only going to get heavier as things continue to go on. When Stormy Daniels takes the stand, if Michael Cohen takes the stand, when these things happen, it's only going to increase the amount of pressure and stress. I think collectively, on everyone who is a stakeholder in this process, that's going to increase. And I think that's very different.
But I think to both your points, though, and this is, and I made this point and want to drive it again in this hour, because Sue, you sort of laid out the TikTok of what happened in that jury selection process, and then of course the self-immolation by the individual. But then hours after that, you've got Jesse Waters on Fox News, as the Daily Beast reports, sowing doubts in his segment regarding the jurors with the quote, "I think at this point we can say it's not going to be an acquittal." What the hell do you have to base that on, Mr. Waters? And this is the problem. And so you're absolutely right, Sue, that Monday morning you could have some jurors come in who are like, I just don't want to be a part of this. But that's the point, folks. That's what the Jesse Waters and the Trump sycophants want to have happen. They want to poison this outcome. They want to undermine the system of justice. And the risk that these individuals are taking is an important risk, but it shouldn't be the kind of risk that they sit there like we've laid out, people crying and breaking down because of the stress of sitting on a jury.
Well, Michael, it's interesting because I think what you said about Jesse, I think that to me is unexpected that he did that. But what you're seeing in the courtroom, and Donald Trump was admonished by the judge for it, and I'm going to be watching for more of this. But it's the idea, there was one juror who was being questioned and was going through her questionnaire, and he was making gestures to her. He was sighing audibly, and the judge wrapped him and said, I don't want to see any more of that sort of jury intimidation again. And that's the sort of thing that we're going to be looking for in the courtroom. And I think that that's going to be unnerving to some of the jurors. Some of them may shrug it off. Everybody's different. But we even saw that level of intimidation. So you've got Fox saying what they're saying, which I expected it, but then you've got Donald Trump in the courtroom doing something very real to the jurors that's can be quite intimidating to them and should not be allowed.
Charles, should the judge have even allowed this questionnaire to be gone through verbally? Like, wouldn't it have protected these potential jurors a little more if they could have written their answers to these questions, and then what we would see in these transcripts and what people would witness in the courtroom, and the reporters and Donald Trump himself would witness, would be the back and forth about very specific things. Instead, folks seem to be exposing themselves on the stand. And then I guess my second part of that is, do you think the judge should, I believe the legal term is sequester, but basically lock the jury down so that they are not going, back and home, being exposed to other folks, and potentially in danger? I think that's not a crazy thing to say.
Well, Simone, I don't necessarily have a ton of critiques of Judge Marchand up to this point, but one thing that I will say is that I do think that parts of the questionnaire should not have been read out loud, particularly things that identify where people work, for example. I think we learned very early in the week that that was a mistake and that was a bad idea.
He corrected it.
And he did correct that. I think that the important thing that viewers need to understand is that you do toe a very dangerous line, because you can't have a conversation and say that Donald Trump needs to be treated like every other defendant and then make these special rules around how jurors are picked with Donald Trump and make it too much of a different process. I think that that's sort of the risk you run in the other direction that a lot of people might not necessarily think about. Granted, Donald Trump, in my opinion, Donald Trump isn't every other defendant. And I think the sooner that we sort of really just wrap our minds around that and are honest about that, it would allow for us to actually take the precautions that are necessary in order to ensure the integrity of this trial. That being said, to your sequester point, I don't necessarily know that we're at that point yet. I think we can get there. I think what should happen.
What's going to take us to get there?
I think.
They've been like, what is going to take us to get there? Seriously,
I think we'll get there. Personally,
I think what should happen is that, at least for the time being, he should be enlisting the protection of the New York State court officers to make sure that when these people arrive, that they are basically unbothered, that they are going through separate entrances, that they are, kept away from other people, that when they go to lunch, that they have court officers around them to make sure that they are protected. And then when they go home, that they have court officers basically escorting them to their homes. That's been done before. I don't necessarily know that it's a good idea to sequester right now for 6 weeks. I do think, however, there should be additional methods like the one I just described that could potentially protect the jurors and keep them in some ways.
I can't imagine there's not going to be.
Right. I just don't know.
Yeah.
The notion of full sequestering is something that you sort of reserve for the most extreme of circumstances. And I understand why you may say that we're already there. I just don't know that we've reached it just yet.
I mean, they've already got in place, and just, the week that we had, the courtroom, the overflow room where we are, it's often frozen because jurors are in the hallway. They're being careful, and mistakes have happened, but they're being careful to get them in and out without any interaction with the media, with any of the parties. And I've covered cases where I've gotten into an elevator with jurors, with other reporters, and it was serious. I mean, we got to the bottom. You don't necessarily realize they're there if the elevator's crowded, and I've been called in front of a judge before and asked what was said in the elevator. They take it very seriously, and they don't want people mingled. And I don't know if people broadly realize that, but they really do. In these, and when I'm usually at a courtroom with jurors, it's a high-profile case. So they always make an effort to keep them apart. And when there's any interaction, the judge wants to know exactly what was said. So I can't imagine they're not going to have security for these jurors going in and out.
I think the details that you both just shared are really important for folks at home to know and understand.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.